Before we dive into the hottest news topics, if you love Flash Drive, make sure you're following us on Spotify and Apple to know as soon as any new content drops.
But while we intend to avoid the worst of the turbulence from overseas, we can't escape it completely. Global challenges, along with high inflation and higher interest rates, will have an impact.
The Albanese government's first budget paints a grim picture for everyday Aussies. We unpack what the budget means for you. Plus, a furore in the sporting world after Hancock Prospecting pulls its $15 million sponsorship of Netball Australia. Is this a case of players standing up for their beliefs, or a case of go woke and go broke? And the UK welcomes its third PM in 2 months. So how did it all go wrong? I'm James Law, this is Flash Drive, and I'd like to welcome back Liz Burke, the Deputy Editor of news.com.au.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. Now, Liz, at the time of the recording, the big breaking news is around the Brittany Higgins trial, the trial into the accusations towards Bruce Lerman. Tell us what happened today.
Yeah, it was, I think, an unexpected outcome. It's not the guilty or not guilty verdict that we've all been waiting for and that the jury has been deliberating over for the past 5 days. It was actually found that one of the jurors had conducted themselves inappropriately. They'd brought some documents into the courtroom that they weren't supposed to. That was discovered during what's been described as a routine clean of the courtroom. And so, basically the judge has found out about that. It's been declared juror misconduct, and as a result, the judge has discharged the jury, effectively causing, what we know as a mistrial. So at the moment, there's no result in the trial that we've all been following for the past few weeks, and there's a date set for February next year where they'll do it all again.
Wow. It's a big screw up, you might say.
It seems that way, yes. Yeah.
So, and do we know anything about what was brought into the jury room that was problematic?
It's been described as some research all we know is that it's to do with false accusations of rape. And so it seems like one of the jurors has taken it upon themselves to go and look into this and potentially consider it as part of their deliberations, which is a big no-no. You're only really supposed to, have access to materials that have been supplied by the court. So bringing it in is a concern in the first place. But there's also the question of whether that information was used to potentially reach a decision or to influence the decision of the jury. The judge has basically just said, that's not on. We can't proceed with the decision that this jury makes if that's been part of it. It wasn't part of the evidence of the trial. Mm-hmm. So they get to do it all again. Do it all again.
You have to feel for everyone involved about having to go through such a traumatic evidence twice. So we won't say any more until it's back before the court in February.
Well, we're all going to suffer, Kieran. This is a budget full of pain for consumers amid predictions of an electricity and gas price shock. The budget predicts rising rents and declining house prices. And the budget confirms 2 looming broken promises for this government on reducing electricity bills and increasing wages. It predicts electricity up 50%, gas up 40%.
That's the grim assessment from Sky News Australia's Andrew Clennell after Treasurer Jim Chalmers handed down his first budget on Tuesday night. The headlines from the budget included plans for cheaper childcare and medicines, more paid parental leave, and an ambitious goal to build 1 million new homes. But the document also showed global economic pressures around inflation and the war in Ukraine would slow Australia's growth and hit every Australian's in the hip pocket. Now, Liz, you were in the budget lock-up here in Sydney, am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
For people who don't know how budget works, what is the lock-up?
Yeah, basically, the government arranges it. The Department of Treasury arranges it. It's the way that they communicate all of the information in the budget to the media, who then, have this time allocated to go over all the documents, go through all the numbers, read the Treasurer's speech before he delivers it in Parliament, and get all of their stories and everything prepared before, telling the rest of the world, well, the rest of Australia, I mean, who else around the world cares, at 7:30 p.m. that night. You used to get like a big stack of documents when you went in there. Now you just basically set up at your little workstation and there's files on the computer.
So they take away your phone and everything, right? Like
that's right.
You can't Google, you can't send messages.
Yeah, no communication with the outside world. It's it's a really kind of unique sort of unusual exercise in media management, some people might say, that goes on. Usually only happens once a year. This year, because this government decided that they needed to have basically a redo budget. It's the second one that we've had this year. But basically you go in there, you find out what's in the budget papers, what's on the books for the estimates for the next 4 years, then tell everyone about it when you get out. And basically, what was the main thing that we found out during this lockup was that Jim Chalmers has a very grim view of the world at the moment.
He sure does, yeah. And you produced a video on the winners and losers from the budget, which we ran on Flash. You can see that there. It was a good video, nice overview of all the main points. What were some of the main takeaways for you?
It was an interesting one because they're, I guess as particularly compared to the first budget that was delivered earlier this year, which was an election budget, there wasn't really that much in it for individual groups or Australians. First budget we saw, it was basically about two things: relieving cost of living pressures, which were a big thing at the time, obviously still are now. But I think really it was also about trying to help Scott Morrison win an election. So there were lots of treats, lots of handouts. There were the cash payments to pensioners. There were tax cuts. There was the fuel excise discount. This one was very much more cautious. It was, there's all of these global pressures going on that are affecting Australia's economy right now. We can't really solve them. So it was more explaining why you're kind of not getting as much as you perhaps would expect from a budget. But there were some Australians that did better out of it than others. Parents, people kind of describe it roundly as families, but it's really a very specific type of family. Parents of young kids or who are expecting to have young kids soon got some good gear out of the budget. They got cheaper childcare is coming in. Extended paid parental leave is coming in. There was some housing stuff, this government's kind of trying to address the supply side of the housing crisis. So, it'll take a decent amount of time, but they're planning over the next 5 years to create some more affordable housing. And then, there were some pretty obvious groups that missed out as well. There were things in there to address a number of groups' concerns in the housing crisis, as well as people who were, looking to buy affordable homes. They're looking to help out downsizers to, free up some of that property stock as well. But basically bugger all for renters, which, we know that the rental crisis is a massive part of the housing crisis. So I think that was, a real disappointment that a lot of people took away from it too.
And it, like you were saying, there was a lot of grim news in it, and a lot of the rhetoric that the Treasurer said around it was about global pressures, the war in Ukraine, inflation, a lot of really big, intractable problems. Kieran Gilbert on Sky News had the Treasurer soon after his speech, and he grilled him and he said, this seems to do a good job at pinpointing the problem, but not the solution.
Exactly.
Do you think that's a fair criticism?
Yeah. It seemed to me more of a kind of a justification, saying, there are all of these issues that are out of our control, and that's why we don't have, as great a grip on the economy as you might think. That's why we can't deliver some of the expectations that you might be expecting from a budget, particularly from a pretty new Labor government who would traditionally in their budget, in their first budget, be looking to address, all sorts of social issues, maybe have like a bit more spending in those areas. that, yeah, it kind of made me, and I think a lot of other people in the room in that lockup, then, subsequently Australians who then, were delivered those messages, gone, why did you do this? Like, why did you lock everyone up in a room, for starters? But basically go against the tradition of how these things are usually delivered, and kind of even deliver a budget that doesn't really seem to do that much. It just it seems like a sort of like a whole lot of fanfare, more of an kind of an announcement of the new treasurer and of the new government than really delivering much substance. I don't know if that's a bit harsh, but
I wonder whether what he's doing is trying to really paint a negative picture so then they can get Australia out of it.
Yeah, that's true.
Like some of the analysis I heard was that they underestimated the sort of revenue they're likely to get from commodities in years ahead.
Yeah.
Very, very conservative predictions there. So if it comes in over, then wait a minute, the budget deficit is smaller, right? And that, also that part of what he might be trying to do is, power prices are going to be bad. Gas is going to go up. So power prices is predicted to go up 50% over the next 2 years. That's going to hurt.
Yeah.
With a way to kind of set the groundwork for intervention and to making changes. I wonder if that's part of the strategy.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's not a groundbreaking strategy to set the bar quite low and set yourself up for future
Good
victories.
Politics, yeah.
So I think there's an element of that, and it was also cementing some of their election promises too, because they came into they came into this campaign saying, we want to do all of these things that are basically not possible under the restrictions that were effectively imposed in the March budget that were that kind of proposed by the previous government. So I guess in that sense there is a purpose to kind of make their stamp and have the books reflect what this government wants to achieve in the next little while. But they haven't really set themselves up for a whole lot of pressure to deliver in the next financial year, 4 financial years ahead. So probably a smart strategy.
Yeah, well, I think there's going to be a lot of work that they have to do, right? Because, as we know, there's these big structural problems with the budget where essentially there's not enough money coming in and too much going out, right?
Yeah.
And so to change all of that, it kind of means we've got to cut spending harshly or tax people more, both of which are pretty unpalatable.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I do get the sense that Jim Chalmers wants to tackle this. And it's a question of whether the rest of the Labor Party has the gumption to kind of do something big. I feel like they need to do something big to turn the budget around.
Yeah, I think so. And it's it's just kind of, I guess, from just an interest perspective and a news perspective that those big kind of strategies of how we're actually going to achieve what we want to do weren't laid out in this budget.
No.
Yeah.
So, there'll be another one in 6 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe there'll be a bit more on the agenda then. What did you make of the Labor government's focus on housing, right? It's something that you and I have written a lot about over the years, because sometimes the budget just does nothing about housing.
Yeah.
In more recent years, they're starting to really understand that it's a big issue. We've been banging on about this for years, haven't we?
I know. We absolutely have.
Every time we've been in budget lockups, we always
That's the
do
first thing we look
story.
for. Yeah, we're looking for something for first home buyers. We're looking for something for housing affordability. And there were those policies in there. And I mean, the housing accord was the big one. That's the goal, to build 1 million new homes over the next 5 years. They seem to be copping quite a bit of criticism about that, over the past couple of days, because there's just, it appears that there wasn't really that much detail. It's build 1 million homes, but who's going to pay for it? Where are these homes going to be? They said that they were well placed, but well placed according to whom? Is that for the people who want to live there, for where the supply is, for where those homes would best service a local economy? And a really pressing question is where are we going to get the tradies to build all these homes? And the supplies as well.
Right.
Because that's basically, two of the great issues that are, that are contributing to the housing crisis, like construction crisis, whatever you want to call it at the moment. It's kind of, there are problems that are feeding into a lot of those issues right now that, from what I've seen anyway, don't seem to be addressed in that plan.
And 1 million sounds like a lot, but I read a report today saying like a million new homes in 5 years is the bare minimum of what we should do.
Yeah,
like
right.
It should be more like 2 million.
Yeah.
To really, free up enough supply to bring prices down in a significant way. So, and, it's not just about first home buyers, right? It's a way to try to address the soaring rents we're seeing, especially in capital cities. Yes. I feel like a lot of people are smarting from that at the moment.
Yeah. And there were other policies in there. There's the, the help to buy scheme, the home, I think, is it the home builder scheme? There's other stuff in there, but this was the big one. This was the only thing that's new.
And then in terms of like cost of living, right? So that's the issue that every Australian is dealing with at the moment. So we're seeing, higher prices in supermarkets, higher power prices, higher rents, mortgage repayments going up. Like we're copping it from all sides. Yeah. Do you think that this budget did enough to relieve those pressures?
No, but I think the Treasurer did enough to, to justify why it didn't. He's kind of saying, you're not really getting any treats in this budget, but it's the best thing for you.
Because if they flood us with lots of payments, inflation will get worse, interest rates will get worse.
Exactly. So it's like, you're not getting your pocket money this week, but there's a good reason for it and it's going to pay off in the end.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Dad.
Remember, Flash Drivers, if you're loving the podcast, let us know. Subscribe and leave a review so everyone can get across the news of the week. Moving on to the sporting world, and there's been a huge controversy this week, Liz, after netball players refused to compete with the branding of mining giant Hancock Prospecting on their uniforms. As a result, the company, owned by Australia's richest woman, Gina Rinehart, pulled its $15 million sponsorship of Netball Australia, leaving the sport in a precarious financial position. The player revolt was all over some pretty abhorrent comments made by Ms. Rinehart's father, Lang Hancock, in the 80s about Indigenous Australians. This is rough, but have a listen.
The ones that are no good to themselves and can't accept things, the half-caste, and this is where most of the trouble comes, I would dope the water up so that they were sterile and would breed themselves out in the future, and that would solve the problem.
Let that sink in for a second. The netballers' move has very much split opinion, though. Let's go to two Aussie sporting legends to sum up the points from both sides. First, here's basketballer Andrew Gaze.
I think it would be really helpful in that situation, and it would have taken away, I think, a lot of the angst for both her and Netball Australia if she could have disowned those comments.
And here is the view from Olympic gold medalist Dawn Fraser.
And I also think, Dawn, that she's been found guilty in the court of opinion of some people for the sins of her father. She's not her father.
No, she's not her father. I mean, I'd hate to be in her position and being, fought over the fact that my father did some things wrong, but, he wasn't in a position to do that. And I feel sorry for Mrs. G because, look, she's a good-hearted person. She's a hard businesswoman. She's been brought up with a hard business family, and she wouldn't be the person she is today if she hadn't, done by the rules that her father set out. So, she's gone the other way and she's helping people in sport to achieve to their best ability. And I can't, Netball Australia has really gone wrong on this attitude. I just think it's so bad for the sport.
So, Liz, should Gina Rinehart have to pay for her father's 30-plus-year-old views?
I reckon when you put the question that simply, absolutely not. It seems like it's all kind of over nothing. Imagine if we were all put on trial for what our parents say.
My parents have said some sketchy stuff, no doubt.
Yeah, exactly. But don't put it in the newspaper and give it to all of my potential employers.
Yeah.
That's not how I want to be judged in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
But I hear there's a but coming.
No, I just think like when you put it that simply, and to me, I think it has been pretty simple. I don't think she should be judged for what her father said. I don't really agree with Andrew Gaze's comments either that she should publicly disassociate herself from them. Like, why should she have to? I mean, she's not that tied to what her father's done in the past. And she's really not that much of a public person. I mean, her contribution to public life has been largely financial. I mean, a lot of people don't see it, I guess, but she puts a lot of money behind sports like netball and swimming particularly, and that's kind of like effectively bankrolling some of the things that a lot of Australians are sort of most proud of that we have in our public life. So I don't think that she necessarily needs to do that, but yeah, I've kind of judged it like pretty simply as that's what it is. But when you hear what the players are upset about, it's just it's something that I've found that a lot of people have seemed to take the other side, and mine's been like a little bit of an unpopular opinion.
Oh, that's good, because I mean, I think my view on this is it's kind of not about Gina Reinhart.
Yeah.
It's actually about the fact that the business that she runs is called Hancock Prospecting, right? And that's Lang Hancock, the man who said those horrible comments that we heard before. And I can't stress enough like how abhorrent those comments are to hear.
Completely.
And a lot of people are like, oh, it's just wokeness. But to me, that dismisses what he said. Like, that's kind of the worst thing you can hear.
Yeah.
And if I was an Aboriginal person, I don't know that I would want to go out and play sport with his name on my chest. To me, that's the bit. That's what it's about for me.
Yeah.
Where it's not about Gina, it's kind of about the name of that business, and I don't think the business can disassociate itself from that comment.
Yeah, that's true.
That's my view.
Yeah. Hadn't really considered it that way. I mean, that's fair to not want to kind of wear that emblem. Another thing that's sort of been playing on my mind is with sponsorship. I mean, it's a transaction, right? So you're getting the money from this company that's like effectively paying you wages, like in the same way that that the media does from advertisers. You might not endorse every single thing that every single contributor to your pay packet does, but you kind of accept it and you accept the benefits from that. So yeah, I mean, if you're not gonna wear the sponsorship, that's basically what the sponsor is paying for, and the player is directly benefiting from it. So, I mean, I guess there's also an argument that, if they don't do that, then they don't get the benefit.
To your point, I think it's totally fair that Gina Reinhart pulled her money.
Yeah.
If they're not gonna wear the logo, or they're disassociating with her business. I think it's totally fair for her to go, all right, I'll take that money back.
Yeah, yeah, but that's not really the issue, is it? The issue is about whether they, sort of have the right to complain. And the way I see it, like, it's kind of done. Like, there was this complaint about the sponsorship. The sponsorship's now being rescinded. Like, do we have to keep arguing over whether it was the right thing to do or not, whether these people had the right to complain? Because it's sort of played out, and we've seen the consequences come down. Like,
Yeah. Well, hopefully someone steps into the void, because, I mean, this is the thing, can beggars be choosers?
Yeah.
Because netball needs that money, really, to be a viable sport. So hopefully someone steps in.
Well, and I think we've heard from a spokesperson recently saying, as you'd expect, we've got plenty of sponsors lined up, plenty of companies are interested, but I mean, we don't know who they are. We don't know who's got the millions of dollars to throw behind netball. So yeah, I mean, ideally someone is, but I don't want to see the player particularly kind of villainized for the stance that they took. But equally, I think there's, if you're accepting money from an organisation, then you kind of have to participate in that transaction.
Sure.
They chose not to participate. They suffered the consequences of that. So, I guess we'll just see what happens next.
Well, the good news is Donnell Wallam, the player who kind of took this stand in the first place, she had a really good match against England overnight. So she kind of let her netball do the talking.
Yeah.
So, I think everyone agrees that we want the Aussies to do well.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing we can
Well, she's come out on top. Like, I don't think Gina Reinhardt is that upset about a few days of negative publicity, and she's got her $15 million back. So
well, it's chump change for her.
Exactly.
Love hearing us analyse the biggest and smallest headlines each week. Make sure you follow us on the socials so you don't miss any content. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok and YouTube.
I am a fighter and not a quitter. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
Yes, after campaigning for the job of UK PM for months, poor old Liz Truss was only in the role for 44 days before falling on her sword. And now the UK has its third PM in the space of just 7 weeks, with former Chancellor of the Exchequer Rishi Sunak. Not only is he young and rich as hell, he's the first PM of Asian descent to serve in the UK's top job. Now, Liz, I thought we were like the coup capital of the world when it came to bringing down prime ministers.
I know. We were supposed to have the most revolving of the revolving door of leaders. What's happened? It's just, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for Liz Truss, but it's embarrassing for us to lose that mantle.
We've been pretty stable for a few years. It's embarrassing.
But you're probably a bit more across this than I am. What do we know about Rishi?
Yeah, well, he's very young. He's like one of the youngest PMs to get the role in something like 200 years. He's 42. And the other thing that's interesting about him is he's rich. So he married well, and his wife is part of sort of like a tech empire. And so he's got a lot of money there. He's also sort of did pretty well for himself. He's from Oxford, and he hasn't been sort of in Parliament for a huge amount of time. Yeah. He's sort of only been a frontbencher for a couple of years, so it's a pretty meteoric rise for him.
Yeah, big time.
Big time.
And he's got a few challenges ahead of him, like not only the challenge of holding on to the job for more than a month, which seems to have been quite tricky for the last few guys, but the UK is also in quite a massive economic crisis. He described it himself as a profound economic crisis. What's he going to do? How's he going to face that?
Well, look, it's really tricky. So, we've been talking on the podcast about our dire economic situation. It's nothing like what the UK and the US is facing. So there, like, the inflation is even more out of control. So it's real tricky. And the mistake that Liz Truss made was trying to stimulate the economy by giving tax cuts. She said that she wanted to inspire growth, but then that kind of, in this high inflation environment, caused all the markets to tank. It was not well received, dragged the pound down to its lowest valuation, I think, ever. So she cocked it up. So now it's up to him to kind of try to turn it around. I mean, I don't envy him at all.
And do you think he's got a good chance? Like, what's the fourth choice of UK Prime Minister got to offer?
Well, the thing is, I think he does have support. I think some people are trying to see this as a clean slate, after all of this drama around Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. He's a fresher face. I mean, he has been around for a while. Like, his reputation in the UK is kind of funny. He's sometimes seen as a little bit out of touch because he is so well off. There's sort of been some supercuts of him on the hustings and stuff, and like him, he seems like a bit of a nerd in a good way.
Yeah.
There's been supercuts of him on the internet of like trying to fill up a car and not looking at the Bowser as the dollars pick up, and people are like, oh, he's so rich he doesn't even need to look. So I think he might come into that kind of criticism as seeing a bit of a toff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the UK in general, I sense that they may try to give him a go, but obviously the opposition is baying for blood and saying, all right, enough chaos, it's time for an election.
Yeah.
So you kind of can't blame them for saying that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he does seem to have a bit more, legit sort of credentials coming from the Exchequer job. I mean, that's something, that's I don't pretend to fully understand, and I don't think a lot of people really know what it means.
But it's like it's essentially the treasurer.
Yeah, exactly. Serious economic stuff.
Sure.
So he seems like the right person to be, to be in that role at the moment. He seems like the right person to be in that role at the moment with that sort of background. Certainly more so than Liz Truss. I mean, as soon as there was kind of any hint that it was going to happen, all I could think was how embarrassing for her.
I know. Like, what is it, 44 days in the job? Like, that's pretty bad.
And my mind immediately went to, because we've seen a few events recently, I mean, particularly with the, with the Queen's death and with the King incoming, where she played a key role. I mean, she was in there, like she was in the box seat at, a quite exciting time. So good on her. She's she's had a decent run in her 44 days. But, where you see the lineups of the former prime ministers in those parliamentary events, things like state funerals, things like that. I mean, she can't be part of that, right? Like, she can't show her face.
She'll probably still get the call up.
I mean, did she, do they have a probation period? I guess not.
I mean, think about if you had a job and you lasted that long.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be putting it on your resume.
You wouldn't show up to the Christmas party, I don't think.
They'd be like, what is this line? It says UKPM, but it's only for 44 days. Explain that to me. Anyway, good luck to Rishi. I mean, for the sake of the world economy, we hope he fixes it, but it's a bit of a task.
Good luck to Liz wherever she ends up too.
Oh, hopefully she's on the beach.
Yeah. So, this is the part of the show where we talk about our favourite streaming service, Flash News. James, what should we be watching on Flash this week?
Yeah, look, there's a really interesting thing that we put up over the weekend. It's a chat with Grace Tame, obviously the former Australian of the Year. She's a sexual assault survivor, and she is forward. She says it like it is. And this speech is, well, it was an interview, I should say. It was really, really interesting. What she was talking about was how people who have gone through the sort of horrible things she's been through and their relationship with the media, and how often victims and survivors are asked to re-perform their trauma for the cameras. And she sort of is going through her experiences with the media and the way she's been treated, and some times where the media got it wrong. And I think it's good for everyone to kind of listen to, I think especially journalists like us.
Absolutely.
She says things like that, it's up to the person about when they want to share their story and on what terms they want to share their story. And certainly that if you ask them onto a show, not to spring it on them and go, oh yeah, Grace, tell us what happened to you.
Yeah.
So it's very fierce, but it's also very funny. She's a crack up.
Yeah.
So I'd recommend watching that. That's on Flash now. It's an interview with Grace Tame.
Sounds like a good one. And she's a great example of someone who's, shared her story initially, but has now gone well beyond that. So she's an advocate for, for other people who have been through situations like her. But yeah, she really tells it like it is. And I think she really effectively uses her platform to kind of, to forward that cause rather than simply reflecting on what she's done. So yeah, I'm really keen to hear more from her.
Yeah, worth checking out. All right, Liz, we've come to the end of another episode. Thanks for your insights as always.
Yeah,
we'll talk next week.
Good one.
Cheers.
See you then.
Stream the world's best news channels wherever, whenever with Flash. Flash lets you stream more than 25 news channels in one place. Customers get 14 days free. Sign up today at flashnews.com.au.